Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the newest tier list of all the hero power rankings. We had a huge patch on Thursday with the Mirage, the new hero, and a lot of hero changes. And this time we have upgraded the production quality by adding a notepad of the hero changes at the top to give you guys some more perspective on how the different heroes have changed in power levels. Bear in mind, of course, that this is my subjective opinion based on how I think the meta is gonna shape and how I've experienced the games in the last few days. So, let's get right into it. First, we have Abrams once again. Been continuously putting him in S tier. He received some small nerfs. They reduced his infernal resilience a little bit, and they also added some more strength to his healing, his siphon life. Unfortunately, I do not think that this changes anything. These are extremely small changes, and I still think that Abrams is chilling on the very top. He still has an extremely stun lock kit. He's got strong laning. He's the only one who can last hit in the laning stage and shoot orbs while reloading, so you can technically never miss a last hit as well. So yeah, Abrams is just right up there with S tier, and he always has been, and that's just the way the cookie crumble. Okay, next up is Bebop. Bebop got another 5 meter in hook range reduced. They also lowered his hyper beam duration spirit scaling, but the biggest nerf, at least for the people who played double bomb, was that they added a 0.3 second delay on Echo Shard. Now you may ask, does this mean that Echo Shard Bebop build is dead? No. Does it mean that it's more clunky to play? Yes. I will post a video on it soon, but the idea now is that you'll start self-bombing a lot sooner. They probably did this to stop all those instant multi-keybind buttons with like gazillion spells cast at once. I don't know who would ever try to make those, but either way, you can still do the hook, uppercut, bomb, double bomb, but you're more likely to be needing a Mystic Reach to be able to get that second bomb cast on the target. So it means that you're gonna be less consistent on hitting it, but it still works. It just feels a little more clunky. The ult and the gun Bebop build is basically unchanged from this patch. So the hook range nerf is fine. His hook is still incredibly good. This is just to make him a little bit easier to play against in the laning stage, so that's fully understandable. I think Bebop has always been one of the strongest laners. He will be once again going to B tier, a little bit lower this time, I believe, but nonetheless, that's where he resides. The nerf was mostly affecting double bomb Bebop, and that's probably not even the best build. I think ult and gun bop or hybrid might still be stronger, so yeah, he is still where he used to be. All right, next up, we have Dynamo. Dynamo received one nerf, and that was the range of Singularity from 8 meters to 7 meters. Singularity is still the strongest ultimate in the game. It's still the only ultimate that could completely turn any lead if you hit a perfect ult. I do not think that this changes anything based on where he should go. I think if your team is coordinated, then Dynamo just can win so many games. Dynamo also almost guarantees that you get the mid-boss crystal, and he's just so damn good. He also has a good gun. He also has a good knock-up with his stomp. He can save teammates with his mini teleport thing. He's just damn strong, and he has been for a long time. Grey Talon. Grey Talon has had some changes. Rain of Arrows can be alternate cast to remain near the ground. This is going to help Grey Talon's farming speed a lot, because one of the biggest issues with Grey Talon was that when you used Rain of Arrows indoors, you would just hit the ceiling and it would cancel out. So this is meant to help his farming speed. His air dash is now fixed as well, which is good. And the biggest change I think for Grey Talon is that he now has a 3-second buffer window to his ult. So before you would always get 5 spirit if you got a kill with the owl, but it was really awkward because it felt like you needed to like steal the kill from someone by last hitting with the owl. So now because it has a 3-second window, it's going to be much smoother to use because you can communicate to your teammates that you're sending the owl in, and the owl stuns and interrupts as well. So you can send it to the neighboring lanes, and even if it doesn't get a kill, it still gets an assist. You get some souls for it, and you're also going to get the 5 spirit permanent stat increase as long as that hero dies within 3 seconds. And this is going to help Grey Talon build stacks much more consistently, which I think is great. The Owl also is slightly bigger. However, I still think that Grey Talon is one of the weakest heroes in the game. This makes him a little bit better to play, but it is just so easy for Grey Talon to get ran over. His strongest builds are usually the ones that are like super heavy spirit focused. He has some pretty good lane harass and stuff, but yeah, I don't think he fits that well into the current meta, and I think a lot of heroes will just run him down. People are getting better and better at buying stuff like knockdown and stuff too. There's so many heroes that can just run him over. He is very fast, he's good at split pushing and stuff, but he kind of excels when he avoids team fights or stays in the back and charges up his arrow. But I still think he's gonna be put, let's go crazy, actually putting him in C tier. I'm sorry, old man. These buffs make him feel better, but nonetheless, he's at the bottom. He also, by the way, when we were able to look at stats, he was one of the lowest win rate heroes in the game across all skill tiers too, so even though he got buffed a little bit, I think other heroes got buffed more. And we are still in a very like tank heavy meta where it's very easy to get ran down. All right, moving on. Haze. So in the previous tier list, we listed Haze as one of the very top hyper carries, damage dealers, very strong ult, and so on. Haze definitely got hit pretty hard this patch. The Sleep Dagger hitbox is smaller. Bullet Dance now more accurately shows who it's shooting. There was some issues for with line of sight. Bullet Dance are now affected by Time Wall, so you can use Paradox Time Wall to not get hit by them. Evasion is halved, and the fire rate is reduced by 10%. These are pretty serious nerfs, but I will say that I think that most people can agree that it was about damn time. I don't think this changes that much in reality. It just means that you're not supposed to be able to just pop your ult and like be immune to everything. So I think especially the evasion was a huge problem. I think that just made Haze a little bit too tanky compared to how oppressive that ult is. So these changes are also gonna make more people build her a little bit more around the rest of her toolkit and not just the ult. So I think Haze still belongs in A tier. I think it's still one of the best carries in the game. Okay, next up we have Ivy. I've always put Ivy in S tier previously. I think she has strongest gun in the game. It's very high fire rate, so it's easy to last hit with. Scales very well with gun items. She can also heal and stun in the same ability at the same time as it also makes her immune. She can also fly the urn across the map. Now she doesn't even need a teammate to fly the urn across because the increase in cast time makes it so she can stand on the urn spot and start casting her ult and fly across. So yeah, just an overall, like a lot of utility, hard to deal with, and I've always put her in S tier, but for some reason they decided to buff her. And I'm trying to understand it, and it seems to me that their idea, because they added a stone form now works against airborne targets, I guess that makes sense. The Kutsu Bomb tier 3 now grants a 2 meter extra radius, and the spirit power scaling is increased. My theory with this is that they are trying to make more people play Spirit Ivy, because Ivy is one of those heroes where almost everybody played the gun build or a support build, but very few people went for the Spirits build. So my theory is that this is supposed to make more people go for other builds. So they didn't technically buff all the stuff that I consider OP with Ivy in the first place. It seems like they're just trying to show some more love to this character by making more builds viable, so I guess that's understandable. Fixed being able to stone form during the take flight animation, I think was a great change because that was just annoying. Like there is just no counterplay. You could just stone form and fly out. But nonetheless, she belongs where she has been for a while, right next to Dynamo and S tier. All right, next up we have Infernus. Infernus received no changes in this patch, so that seems to be a signal that they are currently pretty happy with where he's at. I agree. I know some of you have been kept insisting that Infernus is OP. I disagree. I think he's strong, but because his toolkit specifically is designed around putting debuffs on targets and healing off of them, there are also very specific counters to him. So it's also a bit of a skill issue. Some heroes are easier to counter than others, and Infernus is definitely one of them. He is very susceptible to anti-heal. So that's why I do not think he's overpowered. I think he's good, and he's cool and fun. He's cool character design, cool abilities and stuff. But the fact that he received no changes seems like to be a pretty good indication that they're happy with where he's currently at balance-wise. I'm gonna put him here. I still think that Haze is more scary late game. Haze has this like one-shot potential of stealing the mid-boss crystal with the silencer and all that stuff. Infernus is great, but he just doesn't have that impact with his ult. His ult AoE stuns, sure, but like it doesn't make everybody in the lobby turn off their computer. There is one thing to also remember though, which is not like it's more of an indirect buff, and that is that a lot of items got changed to bullet resistance in this patch. So that is also an indirect buff to Infernus. It means that you might need to itemize differently to build the spirit resistance needed to beat him. But nonetheless, I still think that Haze is more oppressive, and that's probably one of the reasons why they added so much more bullet resistance on items this patch, is because they saw how many heroes just ended up going gun builds all the time, even though it wasn't necessarily natural in their kits. You know, you had like gun Kelvins running around, you had gun Lash, you had gun Shiv, you know, like you had all these heroes that have a lot of toolkits that doesn't necessarily revolve around using guns, but guns just did so much damage. You had gun Yamato and so on, true. You had gun Viscous too. Frick that character. Next up we have Mr. Kelvin. Kelvin is notorious for always getting nerfed. Every single patch since I started playing this game many months ago, they've nerfed Kelvin. First, they removed the disarm from his Arctic Beam. Yes, you heard me. The Arctic Beam used to disarm. And yes, it also spread to nearby targets and disarmed them too. It was great, guys. You really missed out. Then they made it slow for 80%, and then they were like, surely that's fine, right? No, it's not. And then they kept nerfing the Arctic Beam. So what did Kelvin players do? They went into the sandbox and they were like, hold up a damn minute. This gun does a lot of damage. And that's when Gun Kelvin was born. And Gun Kelvin was one of the biggest problems, well not problems, but biggest like challenges in the previous patch. And it was basically like, especially the last week before this patch, where every Kelvin started to buy Veil Walkers, tons of weapon items and intensifying mag, because it's kind of like how you play Warden or any high mobility character with gun items. You're so hard to run away from that your goal, you just run people down. So Gun Kelvin was quite an issue, so they reduced his headshot bonus damage by 20%. They also reduced the bullet damage growth from 1.2 to 0.9, so his bullet damage overall is lower. And his movement slow from Arctic Beam is now down to 50%. So Arctic Beam has gone from complete disarm to 80% to 70% to 50%. And they also did the same with the fire rates, previous patch. So what does this mean? Where do we now put Kelvin? And I'm so glad you asked, guys. He is still right up there. You know why? Because this changes nothing for his ability to be a pseudo support. He still is like an insanely mobile character. His ult still is one of the most oppressive ults in team fights. Yes, you can no longer use it to like instantly win an objective like mid-boss crystal and whatnot, but he still can create so many valuable team synergy moments. Your teammates can use your ice path. You can run the urn with the ice path. Your ult heals and scales with spirit. There are so many ways of playing Kelvin that did not get nerfed at all. And that is one thing I've noticed that they are starting to do now. They're not like doing an overall nerf of a hero's entire toolkit, because that makes them just unfun to play. They do things like nerfing Echo Shard to make a specific Bebop build slightly weaker. Or they nerf Kelvin's gun damage to be like, yo, you're supposed to be a spellcaster with frost beams. Why are you shooting people? And I think that Kelvin gets better the harder the games get. I think on the very like highest level, like pro play in the future, as well as ranked in very high tiers, you're gonna see a lot of Kelvin. He can still rotate so fast. Don't get me wrong, he's an awesomely designed character. He's got such a cool toolkit, but even like you nerf his damage and you nerf his Arctic Beam, his toolkit is still so oppressive. And I completely agree with people in chat saying Kelvin deserves all the hate he gets. Yep. If you guys agree that it's okay to hate Kelvin, let me know in the comments. Because I think it's okay to hate Kelvin. Next up, we have Lady Geist. Big changes on Lady Geist. Life drain cooldown reduced from 42 to 30 seconds. That's a lot. Malice cooldown reduced. Malice tier 1 improved as well. So the actual cooldown reduction is half a second. I fixed life drain not healing extra based on amps, and also gave her a slightly more juice in the trunk by sprint speed increasing from 1 to 1.5. Lady Geist is one of the strongest laners in the game. Her grenade gives her tons of harass. In a lot of cases, she struggles throughout the mid and late game unless you manage to stay ahead in farm. And she doesn't have that much of good teamfight utility. She doesn't have any crowd control except a silence if you upgrade the lifesteal, and also a slight slow on the Malice. I am a little bit biased because Red, my duo, plays a lot of Lady Geist and he plays her really well, and we figure out a lot of plays together. But I think it's important to remember that it's also kind of a pub stomp playstyle. So I also do think that that's something that is going to get more and more punished the better people get at the game. So I think I'm going to put Geist right after Bebop still. Lady Geist, these buffs are great, but I still think that she excels as like a duelist, but that's pretty much it. And then we have McGinnis. McGinnis have only gotten some small changes fixed looking up circumventing the minimum range. So there was this trick you could do where you look straight up to ult with McGinnis to hit people next to you because there's a minimum range in the ult. Now they fixed that, so that makes it slightly worse to play her. Other than that, these are mostly just quality of life and bug fixes. I have always put McGinnis in C tier and they haven't changed her at all. And I'm still putting her in C tier. I still think she's better than Great Talon, and I do know that McGinnis gets annoying in some games, but this is the crown example of a pub stomper hero. The best thing a McGinnis does is just play one of the side lanes and just run at the tower, run at the Guardian, run at the Walker, run at the Shrine, die, repeat, do it again, die, repeat, do it again, die, repeat, do it again. As soon as you get into big team fights, she doesn't have the same kind of presence as a lot of other heroes. Her turrets are annoying, yes, but they're annoying. That's not enough to like put a hero in like a higher tier. You're also never gonna see McGinnis in tournaments in the future. But she's a hero that one tricks enjoy. It's a very specific playstyle. It does feel very good to use her like charge up minigun, but nonetheless, McGinnis is and has been for a while in the C tier. And I know some of you in the comments are gonna say, well, when I play McGinnis, I kill everybody. And when the enemy plays McGinnis, they always run us down. And I'll say, good for you. I'm happy for you. I'm glad maybe you've figured something out that I haven't. But unless she's like 20k souls ahead, she doesn't have that much impact. Okay. Next up, we have Lash. Lash received no changes this patch. He got a big nerf previously, so he's definitely been played and picked a lot less now. But I think that's a good sign. I think that both Lash and Infernus are now in a spot where they are pretty happy with him. I think he did dominate games a little bit too much with his mobility before, and they've kind of managed to find a way to reduce that. So I'm going to put him in B tier right before Bebop. He still has tons of mobility. He still has an insanely oppressive ult. Whenever you play Lash, you just wait for people to push your Walker, and then you sneak up on them, ult, and you toss them right at the feet of the Walker. And it's the easiest quad kill in the world. So he is still strong. He can be played both as Spirit and gun build. There's a lot of flexibility in items you can buy. This is another one of those very high skill ceiling heroes, and people who are really good at Lash, they can dominate a lot of games. And yeah, Lash and Bebop, they're arch rivals. And unfortunately, Lash is and always has been better than Bebop, so that's unlucky. Mo and Krill. Mo and Krill's combo is reduced from 2.75 to 2.5, but his spirit scaling increased from 0.8 to 1.1. So what does this mean? This means that they have probably noticed that Mo and Krill has had a little bit too much power as a support, not enough power as a duelist. So by lowering the time the crowd control takes for his ult and increasing the damage, it kind of seems to me that they're trying to make Mo and Krill a little bit more enabled as a solo killer instead of just being like, hey, I'm ulting this guy, come kill him. He also received the same buff as Great Talon, where there's now a 3-second buffer credit for his kill. So he gets a permanent 30 health increase every time he gets a kill. So this can make him get a lot of HP if games go long. His Sandblast is reduced from 1.5 to 1 second, but the range is increased, so it's going to be a little bit easier to cast and a little bit less oppressive. They increase the base speed but lower the tier 3 talents, so the actual outcome is the same once you have the tier 3. Here's the thing about Mo and Krill. He is probably top 3 laning heroes in the game. He literally heals to max pretty much with one cast of his AoE heal. His gun is good for last hitting. Honestly, his ult is Omega cringe. I just want to quit the game whenever I get ulted by Mo and Krill. But nonetheless, he is just damn good. And I'm putting him here, right at the top of A. I still think that he's like not quite up there with Dynamo, Abrams, and Ivy, but he is insanely good. Another thing about Mo and Krill is that he has a very chunky hitbox. So in the laning stage, if you are laning against the Mo and Krill, the best thing you can do is try to take advantage of his huge hitbox. It's harder to hide behind obstacles. And he has 2 headshot hitboxes. You can headshot both Mo and Krill, meaning that even if he's turned around, you can actually headshot the guy who's riding on his back too. Next up, we have Paradox. Paradox, they added 2% damage jump to pulse grenades, and they fixed being unable to be damaged by multiple time walls. These are not like big changes. Funny enough, this is just another Echo Shard nerf, where some Paradoxes would buy Echo Shard to put 2 time walls to do 20% damage instead of 10. But Paradox is one of those heroes that has a very high skill ceiling, and the ability combos make more sense the more you play her, and the more strategized and synergized your team is, the more value you're gonna get out of Paradox. Her ult is like a Bebop hook that is easier to hit, and because you can stun them with kinetic carbine first, that also gives increased movement speed, it becomes extremely powerful to swap people out and also silence them by placing down her window first. So Paradox is still, in my opinion, one of the top heroes in the game, even though in the past the win rates have not necessarily represented that, but I think that's a skill issue. So I am putting Paradox up here. I still think that, like, because these heroes are all easier to carry with, I still put them above Paradox, but in the right hands and in the right team space, Paradox can, like, you can just constantly look for picks. You can just constantly make the team fights like more in your favor. Okay, and then we have Pocket. Pocket keeps being a big problem when they are very good. It's a hero that has a lot of escape tools. He has a shotgun that is really good to last in the laning stage. His ability combos work really well for harassing, diving, and still surviving. His ult is really good in this tank meta because it adds a lot of healing reduction. He didn't get big changes this time. His ult no longer goes through walls, which makes perfect sense because why should they go through walls? And they're slowly making every ability line of sight respectable. In the beginning, a lot of abilities went through walls. Now they don't. So this is a good change. His barrage doing slightly less damage also makes a change, but he still is, I'm putting him here. He is just so good. And I think the more the Deadlock meta develops, the more people realize how good Pocket is, just because of how like hard he is to stop. So people start buying a bunch of items to counter him, like Curse and Silence. Extremely oppressive in the right hands, extremely bad in the wrong hands. Mr. 7. 7 is a hero that has had a lot of changes every single patch, and they can't quite seem to figure out where to put him. At the last few weeks of the previous patch, people started buying Echo Shard on 7. They started buying Echo Shard and they started doing double stun. And people realized that because of how big the AoE was, and you could sometimes get a double stun in the entire patron pit, and people could just not play the game for 4, 5, 6 seconds. So again, this is where you can clearly tell that they're nerfing a specific playstyle. So they are reducing the stun. They're also reducing how long the stun lasts on the upgrade, and they reduce the radius of it. So these are all the things that were essential when you were playing the stun Echo Shard 7. So this made perfect sense. I think everybody can agree. Even people that played that build were like, okay, this is a little too much. However, there is something fun that came out of this. You may notice that static charge can now be alternate casted on yourself, but it does not stun you. So if you guys recall my double bomb Bebop where I bomb myself and jump in, you can now do this with 7. You can make a melee build. I actually have a melee build already that I'm testing out. So if you want to try it, you can search for AverageJonas on 7 in-game, and you should be able to find my melee 7 build. The idea is to double stun on yourself with Echo Shard, and then Phantom Strike in and start meleeing people who are stunned. Is it gonna be good? Don't know. Is it gonna be fun? Hell yes. But nonetheless, where does it put 7 in the power rankings? So I personally think that 7 is a little bit weaker than the other carries now. People kept changing the way they played 7 based on what part of his toolkit kept getting nerfed. And then they just kept nerfing every new playstyle that came out. So right now I'm putting 7 at the top of B tier. I do not think he is as strong as the Infernus and Haze. I think he needs a lot of farm to get active. He has one advantage, which is that his movement speed scales with Spirit and stuff, but I don't think he is as strong as Haze and Infernus. And because Haze, Infernus, and 7, they kind of cover a similar role, it makes much more sense to compare him to those compared to when we were talking about Paradox earlier. You can't really compare Paradox to Haze as they don't really cover the same job in a game. All right. Who would have guessed that they nerfed Shiv? So, Shiv has been nerfed about 5 to 6 times so far. On release, he was absolutely busted. I think no hero has been more busted than Shiv was on release. They actually ended up halving the damage of his dagger just a few hours after release. So he was extremely overtuned. But there is one issue with Shiv, and that is that because of the nature of his toolkit, he's just always going to be really strong. He is... he's one of the very few heroes that can turn burst damage into damage over time. And in a game like this where there's so much sustain in Spirit Lifesteal and Normal Lifesteal, and the fact that he has a dagger that can also proc Spirit Lifesteal, it just synergizes so well with his ability to turn some of the damage into damage over time. It is similar to how the new Death Prophet facet works in Dota 2 for those who play that, and she also has the same thing where she does a life drain, and yeah, it makes them extremely tanky. So they keep nerfing him, and this time they were kind of focusing on the slice and dice being slightly less powerful, and also how hard it is to keep his rage to max. So killing blow and the rage drain rates and build up per spirit damage is lowered a bit. His full rage bonus damage is also reduced from 20 to 15%, but the talent is increased. So basically this just means that they're trying to put more of his power into upgrading his ult instead of just having a really strong ult without spending ability points. I have a melee Shiv build, and because you're maxing your ult pretty early in that one, he is basically unaffected by these changes. But nonetheless, Shiv is and always has been really strong, and I think I'm putting him here. I still think that Mo and Krill can just... I don't even want to talk about it. It makes me... The thing about Shiv is that Shiv is really good when he's ahead, but he doesn't have any crowd control other than his dagger slowing a bit. So he is also pretty susceptible to, like, if you don't get that good farm, if you don't get to like split push and get your soul farm, then he might not be as strong. Oh, forgot to mention, he also has a shotgun, which means that he excels in last hitting in the laning stage. Every shotgun character has an advantage in the laning stage just because of how easy it is to hit orbs. And they recently changed the deny orbs to be smaller. And originally I thought that this was going to make it a lot harder for shotgun characters to last hit them. But honestly, it hasn't really been a big issue unless you're really far away, which a shotgun character doesn't want to be anyway. So I don't think that changes that much for shotgun characters. I actually think it changes more for like people that play guns and rifles, because you have to be more precise to hit those orbs. Nonetheless, I think it's a good change to make those orbs a little bit smaller, because they're trying to make the knives less favorable than normal last hits. Next up on the list, so this has been a big topic recently, and that is Vindicta. And she has caused a lot of ruckus, especially in the last few weeks, where more people have discovered how much her flight scales with spirit and how much movement speeds also scales with her flight. So they definitely needed to do something about that. She definitely felt way too strong in the previous patch. I haven't seen that many people play her now, so I'm curious to see if these nerfs puts her in a more balanced spot. But it's just like the thing about like a permanently flying character is just that how do you even balance that? Because that's just OP by nature. So like how do you go about it? So anyway, they changed her attack speed a little bit, but the same DPS. The stake distance enemies are allowed to move increased from 6 meters to 8 meters. This is a huge change, because there's so many times when you get staked by Vindicta and you are just almost able to hide behind cover. And this stake change definitely is a huge nerf. From 6 to 8 meters is a massive nerf, because like this just means that it's much easier to, those extra 2 meters are gonna save you so many times. Damage fall off reduced from 58 meters to 45 meters, basically making her not able to do as much damage from as long away as before, which also I think is a good change, because she could definitely do way too much damage from way too far away. So this forces her to play a little bit closer, and hopefully this puts her in a more balanced place. They also lowered the assassinate base damage, but they made it easier to have the low HP indication. So I don't know if you guys knew this, but heroes with execute abilities like Shiv and Vindicta, there's actually a low health indicator where the enemies turn red. So originally you could only see this when you were scoped in with Vindicta. Now they changed it to also be unscoped. So I think this is definitely a good quality of life improvement, because that was something that felt a little bit clunky. They also reduced the zoom level a little bit, which I think is good. I actually think that favors her. And they lowered the spirit scaling on the flight duration, because it was too easy for her to just permanently fly. Where do we put her? Well, I'm so glad you asked. I still think that she is really good, and I am gonna put her right before Paradox. I still think that she can be extremely oppressive. I don't think this like ruins her in any way. I just think that this puts her more in line of where she should be. And as you can tell by the list so far too, there is a very like tankiness focused meta. As you can see, most of the tanky heroes are at the top. So next is Viscous. So Viscous, they've done some interesting things. His cube used to cleanse by default, which I think was a little bit too strong early in the laning stage. And I'm noticing also that that's something they're doing in general now. They are definitely trying to balance more heroes in the laning stage. They lowered Bebop's hook range, for instance. That's also another example of just like trying to like make things a little bit more balanced in the laning stage. So yeah, cube cleansing, it's not a huge deal, but it just means that if, let's say you put a bomb on someone and they get cubed, they won't take damage from the bomb, but the bomb will still go off. So it's still relevant in some cases. They lowered his bullet damage a little bit, because that's another hero where suddenly everybody started playing a weapon build with Veilwalker. They also removed the attack speed from Veilwalker. And that is also kind of like an overall nerf to all those builds that focus on attack speed with that item. So there's been a lot of like indirect changes that also affects how it seems like they're trying to make gun builds a little bit weaker, because I do think that they were a bit too strong. There's also some quality of life changes like Phantom Strike, positioning you more correctly when using it with your goo ball. You can now use down dash during goo ball. I think that's a good quality of life change, because goo ball is really hard to hit, and sometimes you're too high up and there was nothing you can do about it. So people ended up using warp stone downwards and stuff. So this is going to definitely help with that. And the puddle punch enemy warning time increased. So that also means that you have slightly more time to react to the puddle punch. So that makes it slightly easier to dodge. So they made the post-cast delay reduction reduced on splatter, and this is just to make the hero more smooth to play. It means that he can like do aura abilities and shoot again faster. So that definitely makes him feel a little bit more smoother to play. Viscous is tricky to deal with. In a lot of ways, I think Viscous is similar to Pocket in the sense that the more people play this game, the better people get at this hero, because there are just some heroes that need a lot of practice to be good. But to me, Viscous is similar to Kelvin in the sense that he has a lot of ways of controlling the game, but also can like support his team. And that's also why I'm gonna put him next to Kelvin. I feel like some of the best builds I've seen, at least, is when Viscous plays like half support, half tanky, utility, cooldown, not rescue beam. You can even echo shard his cube, also makes him very strong. And I think just like Pocket, I think Viscous might also keep getting nerfed as people get better. A while ago, they changed his punch to no longer be a spirit ability, but a light melee. So that's why people started buying melee items on him. So still trying to figure out how to balance him after they did that. So Warden didn't have the biggest of changes this patch. He's kind of been, I don't know, Warden used to be like this like insane pub stomper, and then as people got better at the game, he didn't really do that well. Because like, you know what the problem with Warden is whenever he ults, he announces it to like half the map. He's like, hello everybody, I am casting my ult for 2.2 seconds. You better run. And then you're like, okay, well, I'll just run for a bit. While everybody else has like, it just like, think about it, like just comparing something like Kelvin's ult. You just press a button and instantly a huge freezing dome that heals every teammate and slows every enemy just appears out of nowhere. Warden channels his ult for 2.2 seconds, and in the last patch they try to address this by giving him much more bullet resistance while he's casting it, but in most cases you wanted to hide where you were casting it anyway. It is strong when it's active, but I'm promising you that so many times when you play Warden, you're just gonna not be hitting anything with your ult. They're just gonna run away, or you're gonna get stun locked. There are just so many situations where your ult will not go off, which is also why a lot of people play the cop build, which is the insane movement speed to try to catch up with people after your ult. I used to believe that the Warden was one of the strongest ones. I really don't anymore. So the changes this patch was that they increased the spirit scaling of his ult, so it does more damage. You should be scared of his ult, don't get me wrong, because if it hits you, it does a lot of damage, but that's kind of the point, that you're almost doing something wrong if it hits you. And they also increased the radius of his binding word. And that's kind of interesting because it also has an increased escape time. But I still think that this is a buff because you only have so many stamina rolls and then you just run out of movement speed, and his flask removes 1 stamina from you as well. So I think you're more likely to get caught by the root with this change than before. It's very common to buy slowing hex on Warden to make sure that they stay within the root and get caught. But nonetheless, I think this is actually a buff. But it doesn't change much on the fact that I don't think that Warden is that great. His gun is also not ideal for last hitting. Like, the projectile is pretty slow. You almost have to buy a high velocity mag. And that's something I forgot to mention about Bebop too, by the way. Bebop has one of the best last hitting weapons in the game. So yeah, I'm putting Warden next to Lady Geist. So Yamato had some changes. Yamato's bullet damage growth reduced. Again, like I said, just a lot of gun builds have been taking the hit here, which I think just makes sense. This entire patch overall seemed to just be hinting that they want people to play more flexibility build, hybrids and spirit builds. I actually saw an Ivy today with escalating exposure on the Kudzu bomb and did a lot of damage. So it's pretty clear to me that that's definitely something that this is like specifically targeting by making more items bullet resistance as well. So her fire rate slow from Crimson Slash is reduced from 30 to 20. They fixed the pathing issue with Flying Strike, which is good because that was really annoying. Duration of her ult is lowered by 0.5 seconds, but then they've increased the duration again on her tier 3. So this is also something we've been noticing now, where like they're taking some of the power away from ults. This is the same that they did with Shiv too, and then they put more of the power in the actual upgrade of the ability. And I think this makes perfect sense. And then the most important one, no longer provides unlimited ammo, because I'm sure all of you have been ran down by an Yamato who's ulted and then she just auto attacks you with insane damage. And because in her ult, she has unlimited ammo and she has a refresher, so she can ult again. So she has 13 seconds where she can't get stunned. She can run around and she can shoot everybody. And because she buys the frenzy item, which is like you're below 40%, you have much higher fire rate, and she still can't die because of her ult, they like perfectly synergize together where you're just permanently running around in super high speed and just killing everybody. So it makes perfect sense that they nerfed it to put this a little bit more in the line of how Spirit Yamato is played out. And I think Yamato kind of is in the same situation as Pocket, where the more people play the game, the harder it's going to be to counter her. Because like if there's a good Yamato, you almost have to buy Silence Glyph or Curse. So I used to believe that Yamato wasn't that good, and I keep running into Yamatos that are just like absolutely wrecking games. And she also has one of the best ways of stealing the mid-boss crystal, because when you're ulted, you can't get stunned. So you can jump into the mid-boss crystal and parry, and then punch the crystal, and no one can interrupt you. So I'm actually moving Yamato up to S tier for the first time. I actually think she belongs in S tier. So yeah, congratulations on your promotion, Yamato. Another reason for this, by the way, guys, is that remember that now a lot of items that had spirit resistance now give bullet resistance instead. So they nerfed some of Yamato's bullet damage, and they removed some items' spirit resistance. So naturally, she goes up because of that. Yamato on Pocket has been climbing up the tier list for every patch, even though they're not necessarily that much changed, and that just shows how not only the meta changes, but also how people are getting better at discovering how each hero is played. Next up is Wraith. Wraith is like one of the 1v1 demons. She's like one of those heroes, when you're laning as Wraith, you almost always buy Reactive Barrier, because as soon as she hits 3000 souls, she gets that insane power spike where she lifts you up with her ult and then tosses 3 cards at you. So Wraith is an interesting one for me, to be honest, because like, so late game when you max the ult, it actually hits multiple targets, which is good, but I still think it's harder to pull off because it's a projectile that has casting time, and people buy ethereal shifts. There's a lot of abilities you can use, and I feel like her ult kind of falls off compared to early game, and you're kind of forced. So what a lot of Wraith players do, they buy Curse or Silence Glyph to kind of guarantee that her ult hits. And there are some pretty cool Wraith builds out there. A lot of them use Tesla bullets, and they go like maybe the more tanky routes. I've seen some like inhibitor builds and stuff. I just don't see how she's as strong as Haze, Infernus, and Vindicta. I think she's a cool hero. I think she has a lot of carry potential. She can definitely destroy in solo queue. She was also one of the heroes that a lot of people played as this like a Veil Walker ganker build, and she also has a nice escape. But I still think she's a little bit weaker in team fights compared to heroes like Haze and Infernus. So I'm gonna put her here. She's still a very cool hero though. I think like if you're new to the game, you should definitely pick up Wraith, practice her. She's a lot of fun. There are quite a lot of builds you can try. But nonetheless, I think that she's less viable right now. But again, I think that this is the most balanced the game has ever been. So it's also important to know that the divide between each tier isn't big. And some of these heroes that have received no changes at all might also just be a good sign that the devs are starting to figure out where they want the power level to be in the game. Because one thing that a lot of MOBAs suffer from is this endless power creep. Every time they launch a new hero, the power level increases. So it's not necessarily bad that Wraith and Lash are in B tier and they got no changes this patch. That could also just be a good thing for the future of the meta and the hero balance. Okay, now the one we've all talked about, Mr. Mirage, the newest hero who launched on Thursday in the big patch. So Mirage is the newest hero in the game. I'm just quickly gonna show you guys what each ability does. So he has a tornado, sends him forward, lifts people up in the air. This ability got nerfed just a few hours after it came out. It used to be 2 seconds, and now it's a lot less. And then they shifted some of that power over to Jin's Mark. So now the tier 5 upgrade also reduces the cooldown on how often you build stacks. So this ability builds up stacks, and then you can activate it, or when it runs out of duration, it does a damage based on how many stacks you have. And then the Fire Scarabs steal some health, plus reduces their bullet resists, and his ult makes you teleport to any hero that you can see visible on the map. It teleports you to the location that the hero was at when you started casting the ability. So now that we have played quite a few matches with different Mirage builds, plus played a lot of matches against Mirage, where do we put him? First of all, his laning stage is really dominant. He has a pretty solid gun. It's really easy to harass enemies by applying stacks, and he seems to be applying stacks just as fine from far away. If you've played Infernus, you've noticed that it's harder to get afterburn stacks on someone when they're further away, but this is not the case with Mirage. So even when he's really far away and his gun does barely any damage, he can still apply the stacks. And this can sometimes throw people off a little bit, because it means that if he finds some long range angles, he can constantly apply stacks. His tornado is also extremely strong in the laning stage. You can use it to iframe/dodge spells. For instance, if a Abrams charges towards you, you can press your tornado and you will toss Abrams up in the air and cancel his charge. You can also use it to dodge Wraith ult and a lot of other abilities like Bebop bomb and 7 stun. There's a lot of ways you can basically dominate in the laning stage. Once he hits 3000 souls, he is able to teleport anywhere on the map. And I think this is better than it used to be, because they recently changed the map to where the side lanes are further away from the middle lanes, and the side lanes are always solo lanes. So now suddenly it becomes really important to win these solo lanes, also because of the changes where your zipline speed boost starts on cooldown and that lane is further away. So what does this mean? Plus the fact that you now get bonus souls for first bloods in every lane, it means that securing a kill in the solo lane is infinitely more important than it used to be. Because let's say that you're pushing the Guardian and you kill someone. Well, now they're not going to be able to come back before the Guardian has already cleared that minion wave, or maybe even 2 minion waves, which means you've lost out a lot of souls. And the enemy has also gotten a bonus soul for killing you in the first place. And this is very favorable for Mirage, because if you play Mirage in a duo lane, you're able to instantly teleport to one of those side lanes and try to set up a kill to almost guarantee that that lane is won. So if this was a few patches ago, that wouldn't necessarily be that big of a deal, because one kill doesn't really matter in the laning stage. Now they matter a lot more. So this puts him in an interesting spot where he can really snowball off of an early lead. So I think that if you get some weapon items in the beginning and you start ganking with ult pretty early, you can really quickly help the other lanes win as well. And that is something that is extremely important in MOBAs in general. It's not just how well can you play your own hero, but how much can you enable your team to also win. So we tested melee Mirage, we tested some echo shard stuff, we tested debuff stuff with anti-heals and slows and stuff, and we tested gun Mirage and spirit Mirage. So far we had the most success with a gun focused build, and that build will be up on Mobalytics probably when this video is out, or very soon at least. And it's also going to be available in game, and I believe that's, at least the way I play him, has been the most successful way by far so far. So where does this put him? The way I see it is that Mirage, in a lot of ways, is an early to mid game hero. He has some ways of scaling into late game, but I do think that he excels in winning early and then ramping up his lead by being active on the map. I know some people talked about, oh, but he applies a debuff, so why not get Ricochet? And even though in some sense I do agree with that, because that's what you do on Haze and Infernus in a lot of cases, they do not necessarily play the same way, in my opinion. I feel like Ricochet is too slow for Mirage, because you have the ability to teleport anywhere on the map. So what this tells me is that you should get items that make you good at fighting early, like Fleetfoot and Burst Fire and Swift Striker, items like this. And the Ricochet is not going to make you good at fighting early, it's just going to make you good at farming. And because he can teleport anywhere on the map, it also makes him great at split pushing. You can be pushing a walker and then you can teleport out of there, or you can teleport to a team fight on the opposite side. So imagine the scenario where you're split pushing up to a walker and then you're forcing one of them to come defend the walker because they don't want to lose it for free. So now the other side of the map has one hero less. So now you can use your Mirage ult to teleport to that team, and now suddenly you have a 6v5 on the opposite side of the map, and no other hero in the game has a faster rotate than that. So you're always going to get a rotational advantage as long as you split push with Mirage, which is also why I think that it doesn't make sense to build items like Ricochet and camp the jungle, because you're not taking advantage of how good he's going to be as split pushing. If anyone has played Dota, it's very similar to how you play Spectre, Dawnbreaker, or similar heroes that have a lot of global map presence, and it can win you a lot of extra souls. But enough about how he plays. Where do we put him? I still believe that he should be here. I think he falls off a little bit in the late game because his ult isn't going to be that valuable when there's just big team fights. There won't be that many options to teleport unless there's been a situation where you've like died before the others and you want to port back to the team fight and stuff. But I do think that his strongest way of winning games is to dominate the lane stage and start using your ult to gank other lanes and make the game snowball early on. Do not buy Ricochet and farm the jungle for 20 minutes. You're not Haze. You will never be Infernus. And yeah, I would love to hear what you guys think and what kind of builds you've figured out with him as well. And feel free to try my Mirage build that is already searchable in-game by search of AverageJonas. And I hope you guys enjoyed another tier list. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you enjoy the content. I'm going to try to keep you guys updated with more educational content. I'm going to try to have a Mirage guide coming out soon, as well as an update on how to play Bomb Bebop now that the Echo Shard is nerfed. And I'll see you in the next video. Thank you so much for watching.